agenda tonight, which is the proposed budget for 2020. And I will turn it over to Mr. Feuerborn.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, the proposed operating and capital budgets for the fiscal year 2019-2020 is hereby submitted for your consideration. Do you have any questions? Good night. I know I say this every year, but I'll start before I begin my presentation. This was an extremely difficult year for the budget. The bookends of fund balance tend to be something that we go immediately to. The struggle this year was in creating a balanced budget within those bookends. And we had to do a lot of things that were behind the scenes, difficult discussions with some department heads to get us there, but we are there for you all this year without having to utilize fund balance in order to get through the operating budget. So that's a pleasure. The budget year actually started off when staff delivered the budget book to me. It actually started off with my first denial, large denial for a particular budget, and that's because staff, and I'll pass it around, had proposed a new cover as opposed to the cover that you are currently seeing. And so I had to deny that particular cover and deny our past for the last year. That's correct. As the council is aware, to begin the fiscal year 2020 budget, we have to look at how we think we're going to begin with fund balance. And to do that, we have to do a thoughtful review of where we are in the current fiscal year of 2019. That being said, if you look at page 35 of your budget, especially if you're a visual learner, you will note that at the beginning of 2018-2019, when we presented the budget to you, we thought we were going to have a beginning fund balance of $3,175,073. You will note that we actually ended fiscal year 18 with a fund balance of $3,446,381, which is $271,308 above where we thought we were going to be. So that was a good starting point for us for 2019. In 2019, we are expecting revenues projected to come in approximately 1/3% higher than we had budgeted at $34,076. Of note within those revenues, I want to talk first about franchise taxes. You all may remember, and I think I may have touched on this with you in a previous work session at one point, that in February for January, all of our KCP&L bills were extremely low. They were very depressed. And that was due to the fact that KCP&L is ostensibly claiming that they had been overcharging for the previous 12 months to that, and they were crediting back what had been overcharged to the customers according to the rates. Of the decrease in all of our franchise taxes for next year that is in place, of the $134,769 that we think we're going to come in under, $134,157 of that franchise tax decrease is due to this adjustment from KCP&L. Because they adjusted in the single month for the previous 12, they then had to adjust. We've seen an adjustment and a reduction of about $10,000 in all of the bills going forward for the rest of this year as they apply what they are claiming is the correct rate. And you'll notice I'm using words like ostensibly and claiming here because we still have some issues with them relative to this. They haven't yet proved up to Mr. Zur and myself that these rates actually changed and what was being charged. As soon as they do that, I'll change that wording within the budget. The fees and permits revenue line is actually going to come in higher. We have been worried, of course, and a lot of our conversations have centered around the fact that new single-family detached housing is down. And in fact, it is down From the budgeted 125 permits, we are currently projecting only 95 of those to hit. So we're going to take a significant decrease on that particular item. The reason it's coming in higher is because of the multifamily that has come in that we have been receiving, that we got permits on during the year. And the multifamily and the single-family housing are both within residential housing units for that particular permit fee. Any questions on those two? So one's much higher than we budgeted for, and we were worried about, one considerably lower. Total expenditures for fiscal year 2019 are projected to be $472,208, below the original adopted budget. That's 4.79%. A lot of that has to do with, you'll remember the exercise we went through because of the winter weather. And a lot of the decreases that we were able to realize there, even over and above what needed to be plugged in. I'm sorry.
They were just wanting to follow along with what you're talking about.
Page 26, yes.
Of the budget book.
Again, the total expenditures are going to be down by that much, primarily due to the exercise that we did on the winter weather. It gave the department heads the chance to do a real thoughtful look at each of their department expenses and kind of put in some stopgap measures that went over and above. In addition to that, we are seeing a considerable number of positions, especially in PD, that have gone unfilled for the year, and that adds up pretty quick. So the combination of the just slightly higher revenue, the increased beginning fund balance, and the significant decrease in expenses for the year leads to an ending fund balance of $3,004,427, which is $777,593, or about 1/3% more than we had actually budgeted for ending fund balance for 2019 going into 2020, and that gives us our starting point for the next fiscal year in the general fund. What I would note on the $777,000 increase is, with the exception of $34,000 of that in revenue, all the rest of that is estimated beginning fund balance that was primarily due to decreases in expenses in the previous year and the decrease in expenses for this year. So what we are seeing is the spot where we can control our destiny the best is by taking a very conservative, cautious view towards what we are spending. Budgeting conservative, thinking that we are going to need to spend it, but at the same time, all through the year, all the people who are sitting at this table and next to me are doing an outstanding job of minding the store, if you would. So, fiscal year 2020, we begin again with the $3,004,427. Staff projects total fiscal 2020 revenues budgeted to come in about 1.42% higher than fiscal year 2019 budget amount, and about 1.7% higher than fiscal year 2019 projected receipts. The implications there are obvious. We are very concerned about the revenues that are coming in and the drop in the revenues, especially in franchise taxes. Still concerned about how the housing market is going to go and where the housing market is going to go, and changes in people's preferences. Of note within the revenues, the property tax is expected to be is projected at this point to be approximately $72,655 higher than projected received in the current fiscal year. That entire amount is entirely due to new growth, as we discussed with you all when we were doing the property tax levies last week, the water balance test. Anything that's existing, we will make approximately exactly what we are making this year. So any new money that's in there is associated with the growth. Franchise tax receipts for next year are budgeted to come in $60,840 higher than fiscal year 2019 projected amount. Sales taxes are we're projecting that they will not even come in 1% higher than this year. Again, with sales tax, we don't, even if right now we think we know somebody's coming in, we don't assume that. Conservative budgeting dictates that we don't assume any new revenues if they are not absolutely certain as of this writing. Fees and permits saw a significant decrease in the single-family homes, as I've discussed. The budget amount, again, it was for 10 less than what we think we're going to get as a deficit this year. So the budgeted amount is actually going to be, that we're using throughout the budget for both the capital funds, franchise tax increases, et cetera, fees and permits, is 85 new homes. Incorrectly, the first mistake we found, because naturally within an hour of passing the budget out to the council, we always find the mistakes in it. And you will note that under franchise taxes in the left-hand column, we actually put in 95. That's the actual that we're projecting for this year. That number should actually be 85 within your budget books. Municipal court are budgeted slightly, revenues are going to be budgeted slightly ahead of 2019, but slightly below the 2019 projected revenue receipts. This is due primarily to new caps that have been put on as far as the ceilings that can be placed on fines. And that looks like it's going to be continuing into the near future. We would hope for some legislation this year, but every single time we seem to be making progress in that regard, something goes haywire at the last minute on us. Then, as the council can see, we talk about the transfers. Transfer in from the transportation fund of $320,000 related to the transportation-related expenses within the general fund. Same thing with the stormwater sales tax fund at $295,000 transfer in, and transfer in from the enterprise fund, which of course there's a lengthy calculation of that within the budget book itself that you can look at to see how we get to that. But the essence of it is for those direct and indirect costs that are borne by the general fund, but that are utilized entirely by the enterprise fund, we get the transfer in. A good example of that would be the utility billing clerks. Their entire work is associated with water and sewer bills, and so their salaries are paid out of the enterprise fund through a transfer into the general fund. Any questions on revenues for 2020 so far? Great. Compensation, benefits, and staffing. Obviously, the largest component of our budget is in our people. They are the lifeline to our citizens. They are the bread and butter of what we do because we are a service organization. So, compensation for next year. I am proposing to the council a 0.5% increase in the chart, and following the increase and improvement in the chart, then stepping our folks through, which represents 2.5% increase in salary, and then with the 0.5%, the math gets a little bit goofy, but that actually translates into just slightly more, way a lot of decimals here, but slightly more than a 3% increase for our people next year. Health insurance benefits within the current budget. We have budgeted the medical increase at a 20% increase, a 2% for dental, and no increase for vision care overall. We know the dental for sure, and we know the vision for sure. As usual, medical lags behind. I feel like we are a little bit ahead, and unfortunately this year I have to turn over my negotiator award with our broker and our medical insurance folks to Mr. Icky, who is in charge of that this year. So the council knows Cigna began at a 58% increase in our medical costs. And in a very short period of time, Mr. Icky has gotten them down stubbornly after he said when he got that, they gave that increase to him on a Saturday night, I think via email, and then they all scurried out of town. And as he puts it, left me to throw up into my shoes because I was that worried about telling you. But he has negotiated with them with very limited changes in the coverage structure that I hope do not impact our people, but in a very insignificant way. He's gotten them down to where I am very comfortable leaving this 20% in the budget and thinking that we will hit that or below at this point. Loggers, which is of course our retirement system, contributions decreased for the general employee from 15.9% to 15.5%, and increased for our sworn police department personnel from 17.6 to 17.8. That is actually a very insignificant increase for loggers. We see 2 and 3 and 4% swings from them at times. The next compensation, benefits, and staffing is the situation with our IT department. I am proposing a change to the name of our IT department so that I can actually understand what it means, because I've never known what information technology actually means as it applies to all of those items. So I am proposing that the department name be changed to Integrated Technology Systems, because that is exactly what they do. One day they're working on a phone, the next day they're working on the clocks, the next day they're working on software, the next day they're working on the computers. So it is definitely integrated technology. I am proposing one new FTE be brought into the ITS department as a senior technician, range 14. That particular individual, what we plan to do with that particular position in the broader scope is currently all of the IT items and other items associated with support within the police department are done by a support lieutenant. We actually have a patrol lieutenant and a support lieutenant. That situation won't be sustainable in the long run. In the long run, we are going to need 2 lieutenants on the same level, not split, both serving patrol. So the effect of this will be, we will be transitioning the current support lieutenant into ITS. And then we will be hiring a lieutenant for the police department, which will have the effect of getting 1 more police officer on the streets, if you will, in a command position for the police department. That's the long-range plan for that one. Promotions that are included within the current budget include the current office assistant to administrative assistant. So you all are aware this is Ms. Bratton. The current assistant city planner to city planner. The current communications specialist to communications manager are all included within here. Any questions on personnel, benefits, and staffing? Move on. Departmental notes. In the administration, you do see the significant increase that is associated with the assistant city manager coming on for the entire year now. He was only partially budgeted in the previous year. And the promotion of the office assistant, along with, and this goes for all the departments, the increased personnel costs associated with normal movement and the insurance increases, and a slight increase within this budget and contractual. ITS, the additional FTE proposed contributes to the increase, again, along with normal movement and the insurance increase. It also contemplates a significant increase in software support and replacement of the city's security camera server, which is a very high dollar item. Development services, part of the increase includes the promotion of assistant city planner to city planner and the normal insurance increases that would be associated with and personnel cost increases associated with movement through the chart. The Streets Department, the decrease from fiscal year 2019 budget by $33,111 is again one of those items, those kind of subtle unseen items where we are transferring those operating costs to capital costs because it's actually a capital improvement when we're doing maintenance to the streets, very similar to street preservation. Municipal Court, proposed increase from the fiscal year 2019 budget by $15,065. This is primarily due to we have transferred the expense associated with prisoner incarceration from PD over to the court. The primary reason for that is because a significant portion of those incarcerations are what is ordered by the judge and not just taking somebody over to Belton's jail. The police department still has a budgeted amount, but it has been reduced, and this one has been increased after a study of that. And thanks to the chief and to Ms. Furr for looking into that for us. Communications, the budget for this department is proposed to decrease from 2019 by $25,420, but primarily associated with the fact that now all of the assistant city manager's salary has been transferred over to administration. Even with the promotion, since we're not backfilling Ms. Harmer's position, we'll see a decrease within that particular department as well. Police Department 2020 budget, obviously this is our largest budget in the city, and rightfully so. The Police Department budget is proposed to decrease from fiscal year 19 by $365,566, primarily associated with changed outs of personnel, seasoned personnel, and we're hiring in new or people just out of the academy, and so there is a significant personnel cost decrease associated with the Police Department. Transfers from the general fund to the park fund. Again, this year, I would be recommending to the city council a transfer into the park fund of $100,000 as in years past. The expansion items, the single expansion item included within this budget is the senior ITS technician position that I previously spoke of. Items not included in the city manager's general fund proposed budget that came to me were a PubWorks mobile app. It is $6,945 one-time cost and $700 annual maintenance cost. Not within here, primarily because even that small amount would have put us slightly out of budget. If there is a way during the year that we can get this particular item plugged back in, I'll figure it out and I'll be back in front of the council on it because it does look like a pretty efficient app that will help our folks in the field. And we like helping our folks in the field.
So to that point, having read through the budget many times in your budget message, it's obvious we want to take a very cautious approach towards conservative fiscal budgeting this year. But it would appear to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things we got hit with, obviously, this past year was weather event upon weather event, and we went over in labor costs, certainly, and material costs as well. We have an unreserved fund balance that may or may not be needed. We, as opposed to other entities, run a living budget as opposed to a budget that's opened and closed maybe one or two times during the year. Therefore, this council, say we got 6 months down the road, we've cleared the winter weather, and so we know what our fixed costs there, if they're higher than anticipated or on budget. If we wanted to use fund balance at that time, and we had it, and you felt comfortable with that, we could do that at that time. Is that a correct statement, sir?
And I note your term living budget. You are absolutely spot on with that. At any point in time, the city council can amend the budget during the fiscal year to move things between departments, utilize a fund balance that's out there and available. You've often heard me say, if we're going to be utilizing fund balance, the wisest course of action, the most fiscally prudent course of action is to utilize fund balance on single cost items only, because recurring cost is going to do just that on you, and if everything continues to slide, you're going to be digging deeper and deeper into the hole. So with all of that being said, all of the foregoing being in place, it's projected that the general fund ending fund balance for fiscal year 2020 will be a total of $3,008,211. After you reserve 20% of the recommended operating expenditures or proposed operating expenditures, which is $1,973,932, you end with an available fund balance of $1,034,279. That's on the bottom of page 28, right-hand column. Now comes the line that I put in every budget. This amount is available for additional use as the council directs. This is the line that hasn't been in the budgets in the past. However, the economic climate at this time is uncertain. Residential housing preferences are changing. We have a changing landscape in that regard. Traditional commercial sales continue to erode as the internet sales boom. This past winter was evidence that things that we believe we have conservatively budgeted for year after year and with year after year of experience can jump up and get us to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars within our budget. So then I quote directly from GFOA in here: the need for larger available fund balance reserves is highly dependent on two factors: the predictability of the city's revenues and the volatility of our expenditures. Like no other year in the past that I have presented budgets, and this is my 32nd, next year is the most uncertain in my mind. We believe that we have budgeted conservatively, but there are items that are simply out of our control. And when you're budgeting less than a 1% sales tax and you're budgeting only for growth in the tune of $60,000 in property tax, those lead the city manager to sleepless nights. So in consideration of that, I would encourage the council for temperance in your consideration of the available fund balance for next year. Any questions on the general fund? I'll move immediately into the park fund. I'd like to start on the park fund with a piece of good news, and I'm actually going to let Mr. Icky present this to you all. We've had a very nice donation.
This past week, we were contacted by an individual, a family member with the Scott Family Foundation, residents here in Raymore. They are looking to donate and will be donating $27,500 to the Hawks Nest playground at Hawk Ridge, purchasing the musical elements as well as the rock wall, or the rock climbing wall. They're very excited about the program and the project, and we've invited them not only to the ribbon cutting this week, but at Hawk Ridge Park, but also to the gala later this fall, and look forward to partnering with them and the foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Icky. Within the parks, again, the Parks Board presents a balanced budget to me every year. They work very, very hard on it. They have to start really early, and Mr. Mustine has done an excellent job in a dynamic year of kind of juggling the new facilities that he's having to staff up, and at the same time getting meaningful projects within his capital funds before the council. So dynamic that it was changing up to and including last week when he had to have a special meeting with the park board just to get everything finalized with them. So many thanks to them for their time on it, and many thanks to Mr. Mustine. The revenues for next year in the park fund are within the park levy. The council will remember this is a very small portion of every dollar that comes into the city through the total levy. 9/10 and 4/100 of that is associated with funding our park operations. The total for next year is currently projected at $420,565. That's 27% of the total revenue within the park fund. But the next one is the most significant. Program revenue is projected at this point in time and budgeted at this time at $606,215. That is 39.74% of the total park fund revenue. The significance of that number is years and years and years went by where program revenue was stagnating between 30 and 33%. The impact of being able to jump to 39% is new buildings coming online and the rentals that are associated with that. We will be moving at the rack from to less program revenue and more rental revenue because we have a very long line of people who are wanting to rent that. So if we have a program that's there that's not making it, we're going to be very quick to shut that door so that we can get this thing rented out and be making money off of it, because we don't make money off of an empty building over there if the program doesn't make. Park sales tax, fund transfer, every year we supplement the other revenues within here. This particular year, that proposed transfer from the park sales tax fund to the park fund is $375,000. Transfer from the general fund, as I had discussed earlier, at $100,000. Parks and Recreation expenditures for 2020 are proposed to increase from the 2019 budget amount by $124,896, primarily associated again with normal movement of personnel through the charts and the increased facility programming. If the increased expense of facility programming goes away, the revenue goes away. So they kind of balance each other. I'd also like to note for the council, as you look through the park fund, you'll note that this year, the personnel within the recreation department that are associated specifically with the activity center and with Centerview are now budgeted to those two locations. For a future consideration, can't happen this year, but I've asked Mr. Mustine to develop a job description and proposal for future years for both of those facilities for an event coordinator. We need somebody who is professional at that, who takes the load off of, and if they continue to hit this way, we'll have the revenue source to pay for this particular individual, and that's the sort of thing where nothing happens until you sell something. So we need to be selling those facilities, and if we've got somebody out there doing it, it'll pay for itself, I'm sure, in no time. Any questions on the park fund? Fantastic. Enterprise fund, water, sewer, and solid waste. Again, the entirety of the enterprise fund, both in water and sewer, as we discussed with the council at the last work session when we brought the rates before you, and especially the solid waste, are cost of service and cost of service only. We do not make money off of running these funds. If we make revenue, if there is revenue over and above expenses, it contributes to the rate for the next year in order to try to drive the rates back down in whichever one of those divisions it's applied to. The revenues for next year are based on the water and sewer use charges that we presented to you at the last work session. Water rate decrease of 17 cents and a sewer rate increase of 44 cents for a net increase in the total rate of 27 cents. Expenditures within the fund, water next year is not going to go up as we had discussed with you. The water purchase amount is $2,025,106 currently projected. This amount is higher than the current fiscal year, but it is only associated with new growth and projected usage in the next year. The sewer, the cost of treatment from Little Blue Valley is included in this budget. The amount is $1,470,625. You'll remember that this year, that impacts next year, there was a significant increase in the Little Blue Valley sewer rate. It also, this budget includes an expense of $718,380 to the Middle Big Creek Sewer District. That particular rate is associated with very minimal growth out in the Middle Big Creek area, and the rate remaining at $32.50 per connection. Solid waste, as the council is only too well aware, cover included, we have changed our solid waste provider during the year. For the fiscal year 2020 period, November 1 through June 30th, the cost for these services will be $14.45 for trash and yard waste service only, and $19.65 for trash, yard waste, and recycling combined. There, on top of those two charges, there is also a minimum $1.50 for the cart charges to be amortized out over the course of the next 6 years to pay for the carts that we've had to purchase. Transfers out, again, the transfer into the general fund of $892,498. The Enterprise Capital Maintenance Fund, which we use to pay for any infrastructure maintenance charges associated with water and sewer. The transfer out, again, next year in the amount of $600,000. The $892,000 is an increase of approximately $60,000 over the transfer into the general fund from this year. Any questions in the enterprise fund at this time? Terrific. Debt service fund. The short form for the debt service fund is that we have proposed to the council, as you all know, through first reading, that the debt service levy amount be held at 71 cents and 71 and 71 cents. Currently, that would lead to the payment of next year's scheduled debt service in the amount of $3,450,455. Total debt of the city is currently $30,936,000. We do a couple of departures within this. We do anticipate bringing within the next several weeks a refunding before the council, not a part of the debt service fund, but actually a debt service amount that we pay out of the capital improvement sales tax fund. It is the Hubach Hill North Cass Parkway TDD debt issuance that when the TDD hits, the city was to be paid back on that. We have paid millions out of the capital improvement sales tax fund and still are not seeing any development down there. The problem now is that particular debt service issuance is going to start stepping up, and it's going to eat away the capital improvement sales tax fund that we have for valuable projects within the city. We are going to be refunding that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Williams, but I believe it is the perfect timing for it, and the refunding is going to save us over $2 million in interest on that. We'll go with level payments of $400,000, so I know exactly how much I can present to the council in any given year as far as that expense is concerned, so we know exactly what we have to spend out of that fund and the available fund balance that's going to be there. That's the first thing I wanted to talk about relative to the debt service fund. The second thing I wanted to talk about relative to the fund is released to the public last Friday. We were held quiet on this particular item, but Moody's has reaffirmed our AA2 credit rating. Just to read from the credit overview, Raymore has a very strong credit position. Its AA2 rating slightly exceeds the median rating of AA3 for cities nationwide. The key credit factors include a strong financial position, a strong wealth and income profile, and a sizable tax base. It also reflects a moderate pension liability and sizable debt burden. We already know about the sizable debt burden. That's because we're in a growing community with a great school district, and the school district has to take out a lot of debt as they grow as well, and so that overlapping debt tends to hit our citizens. But very, very good news, once again, from Moody's. Mr. Goffey, writing to that effect, and it's buried within the profile, and I'll be sure that we email that to the council for your use and bragging rights. Mr. Goffey, writing to it, says, I'd be glad to address any of their commentary with you of the factors they measure. Some have improved, notably the tax base and the family income, while a few have weakened, fund balances, debt, and pension liability. The pension liability is a meaningful part of the Moody's credit rating, and they have a standard way to calculate their number so it's consistent across the country. From your perspective, it's a logger's matter, as I'm sure you're making the required contributions, which we are. Obviously, there are a lot, as you all know. There have been, especially down in Florida, a significant number of these standardized retirement groups that have folded and gone under because they could not make their contributions. We happily do not have that problem. Todd goes on to say, as the city considers additional debt, it will be important to maintain or add to fund balance levels. While it appears the bond rating is fine for now, it is something we will need to monitor. Happy to discuss further. So again, reinforcing my call for temperance relative to our fund balance, at least this year. The last thing I have to report relative to the debt service fund to the council tonight is we also had Todd work up some calculations, and it is my belief that within the next budget year, I will be coming to the council with the recommendation to go for a no tax increase general obligation bond issue. By April of next year, we hope to have completed the Kentucky Road project, and we hope to have be in a point where we are opening portions of TB Hanna so we can tell the public we kept our promises with this particular bond issue. So the council knows, and staff is working on a number of lists associated with this. If we were to take that particular bond issue out today, no tax increase, holding the 7170, we could actually garner more than $23 million in bond fund projects, which is a phenomenal number and attestation to the great growth since our last bond issue and the value of the homes in the city. Any questions on debt service?
You answered my second one. Reading through the book, I'm pretty sure I'm right, but we do not have any of our debt issues that'll be retiring during this current budget year. Is that a correct assessment?
I don't think in this year.
No. Thank you.
Internal service funds, the vehicle and equipment replacement fund, there are several purchases slated for 2020. And it should say 2020 as I'm looking at it there. Police, 4 patrol vehicles and 1 cargo van. Streets, 1 tractor and 1 dump truck. Parks, 1 Ford 350 truck with a dump bed, 2 SUVs, 1 Ford F-250 4x4 and 1 mower. Clearly, several years ago, several of the parks vehicles that weren't on came on, and we're now in the replacement year for them because he's hitting it big this year. Water and sewer, 1 mini excavator. Any questions on the VERP?
Dale will remember this because he was here during those periods of time where we didn't have the VERP program. But if you'll recall, councils in the past have always kind of looked at this small section here and spent a majority of their time discussing what's good or bad about those particular purchases. But since the VERP program is now here, it's just a small 30-second blurb of conversation and we move on, which is really nice because now you get a chance to really absorb the entire budget rather than be totally focused on those capital equipment purchases, right? Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about that, so it's a great program.
The And since you bring that up, it's actually a great segue. We've actually formed up a committee. The VERP can go stale after a while. You get into predictable habits and you don't ask the questions that you should be asking. Again, the budget's a living document. The funds within the budget are living funds. So we formed up a committee, and I've asked Mr. Icky to head it up with the assistance of Mrs. Williams. And they're going to be sitting down with all the department heads that are impacted, and especially those department heads like PD, Public Works, Parks that are significantly impacted. And they're going to be going through with a fine-tooth comb how we're applying things, how we're purchasing the simplest things. How are decals that have to go on to police vehicles being purchased? What's reasonable as far as our trade-in program is concerned? Should we be selling outright? 1,000 questions that we need to be asking ourselves on a regular basis relative to that particular fund. If I could turn the council's attention at last to page 249. This, of course, is the restricted revenue fund, and we use this fund for primarily pre-funding plans within the city, or if the council has restricted some items. For instance, you'll note last year you used some available fund balance to get us down to a particular level and asked that $54,750 be transferred into the restricted revenue fund to eventually be used for the Johnson Drive project. You can kind of look down here and see a lot of what we're doing in the background. It's kind of an interesting fund to explore. There are occasions when months will go by and I have to jog my memory on what items happen to be setting in here. Of some of these, eventually, we are hoping, for instance, you'll see the transfer in for the GMP update. The council will remember that immediately after we finish code, we as staff are going to be undertaking a new comprehensive plan that includes the GMP update, that includes transportation plans, water and sewer plans. All of our plans are going to be wrapped up into one comprehensive plan. I don't think, and staff is going to be directing that. We're going to need some consultants, but on a limited basis. I don't think we're going to need $80,000 into there. So what you're probably going to see me doing next year with next year's budget, after I get over the fear of this year's budget, I'll probably be presenting to you that amount be reduced and these funds be returned to the general fund balance at some point in the future. But I just want to, this is kind of a, at least for me it is, it's kind of a fun read, but everybody else is, glazing over, I know. So that concludes my visit to page 249 for you all. With all that being said, that concludes the presentation of the operating funds, if the council has any questions at all on that particular portion of the budget.
See no hands.
Terrific. If we could move to the capital funds. And the council will remember what I do with these is, rather than doing a painstaking detail, I try to get us kind of right to the meat and potatoes, which is what are the projects within it. And I may have to rely on my department heads to guide me if I forget anything. To that end, the page that you should probably get the most information from is page 265. This year, we have total capital projects proposed within the budget at this time of $4,438,227. For the council's reference, last year when we proposed the budget, there were $3,949,200 in projects being proposed to you all. That ended up being a higher number because the council added some projects in during the budget process. So it actually ended up being approximately $4.6 million before all of that was done. So a little higher when it was finished, but again, at the proposed level, we're doing significantly more at this stage of the budget relative to capital projects and studies. The most significant change to the normal projects that we present, street preservation, curb rehab, is you'll see under stormwater that I have increased the annual curb replacement program amount from 200,000, or from 200,000 to 300,000, to put an extra 100,000 into that. That combined with the annual curb replacement program being funded out of the transportation fund and the right-of-way infrastructure repairs could lead to next year even more being spent on curb replacement than we're doing on street pres, and obviously the never-ending project of curb replacement. But you can tell your folks, we're trying. 800,000 is a lot of money for curbs. So that being said, that was the single change to a recurring project that you would see. As far as new projects are concerned within buildings and grounds, facilities, duress, and fire system, which is a very, very fancy way of saying a panic button. We're going to be putting panic buttons in new strategic locations, and specifically at the receptionist desks. The panic buttons will lock the doors down in some cases, and then on the reverse side, we'll be doing a new fire alarm system upgrade. That particular upgrade will allow for the doors in the booking room to unlock in case there's a fire. They don't automatically unlock at this time. City Hall, Police Department parking lot repair. The primary component of this one is, if you've ever had the chance to go down just outside the Sallyport, is where we have our dumpster enclosure, and you can tell that we didn't put in the proper surface for a dumpster enclosure. There's huge ruts, and it's been torn out a couple of different times. This time we're going to do it right. I believe we're calling for concrete. Exterior door repair and replacement in City Hall and the Police Department. With the exception of these front doors, a lot of our all-metal doors, like what go into the Sallyport and downstairs, are entering the end of their useful life and need to be replaced. City Hall sidewalk repair and replacement and repair. The perfect example of this one is right out here on the front. We have this brand new, really nice front, but the steps going down have been patched numerous times, and when we go through the winter, we're seeing chunks come up all over. There are other components of the sidewalk that are also going to have to be replaced. Radiant heaters down in the bays at Public Works. The heaters that are there at this time are entering the end of their useful life. We need to get those repaired. When those bay doors go up, basically you're losing a wall. And so we need to get that place heated up so our people can do their work properly in there. Parks concession door access system. This calls for at each of the concession stands a card access system similar to what we have here, so that we can issue limited cards to our part-time personnel who are working in there, and we don't have to always be out there keying and unkeying those doors. There's another item associated with that one. Mr. Mustine, what's the other item associated with the concession door access system besides getting in the doors?
We can program them to lock in the evenings.
And also the restrooms, so that it relieves PD of the need to have to go around and make sure that the restrooms are locked up and buttoned up each evening during the season when they're open. It also calls for, if they automatically lock and somebody is in there, they don't have to spend a terrified evening in one of our parks restrooms. You can still get out, just like if you were here. The Memorial Park Arboretum light replacement, the council may remember that Mr. Mustine came to you all a couple of meetings ago with a budget amendment that remove this. This is simply putting it back in for next year. Recreation Park Playground replacement, age 5 to 12. The Recreation Park Playground is in considerable disrepair. This is the component of it that's the larger portion, the larger piece that is down there, as well as the ground cover that's associated with it. The piece for the younger age is in an out year, but it's in better shape than this particular one is. This one is in immediate need of repair. The Johnson Lake Fountain down here is going to call for the installation of a fountain in the middle of Johnson Lake, similar to the one that we currently have at the Recreation Park Pond. Recreation Park Trail Gap and Crosswalk. This is a nice amenity. It's also a safety issue when the park is being heavily used. This will allow for a connection to our existing trails that runs along a Recreation Park Drive there, so that people can get to the interior without having to walk out in the street when it's really busy over there. TB Hanna Park landscaping and earthwork, after we get all of those projects in, this is a continuation. If you look at the park sales tax fund, you'll see in a lot of out years, there's a lot of little nick things that are going to be done over at TB Hanna to continue the upgrade on that park piece by piece. Within sanitary sewer, upgrade to the SCADA system. The software in the SCADA system, like all software, eventually reaches a point where they will not service it. We need this to be able to monitor water flows and the amount of water that's in our system, and it's going to go out of being able to be updated and serviced by the company, so we need to get the upgrade done. The Willow Wind sewer connection, this calls for a sewer connection from Fox Ridge Drive up under 58 Highway to serve and it's on the description, it actually says Peace Drive. It's a little west of Peace Drive. There is a lift station there that is in terrible shape. It is a shared lift station from Willow Wind and Foxwood Springs, and we are constantly up there helping them service that lift station. If anything went wrong with that, we would have a problem. This is really, I liken this to being very similar to the Herald Estates situation. So we're going to bring up for gravity flow to that lift station going through this particular property and under the street and hook up to it so that the problem is taken care of once and for all at that location. Yes.
And the addition of the Willow Wind sewer connection, will that also provide for access, or at least easier future access to development on the south side of 58?
Yes,
Okay.
most definitely.
Thank you.
It will not help the corner tenant, but it will help any of the rest of that.
Development on the
particular
west side,
development. That's
probably,
correct.
of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Stormwater. Within stormwater, of course, as I discussed, the annual curb replacement program, the Silvertop Lane bridge wing walls down here in Silver Lake are failing, and this calls for, we've actually engineered, this is one of our first, we've engineered it internally, have those made and dropped in and connected to the existing culvert that is there. Culvert replacement at Aspen and Olive Jefferson areas. A lot of culverts, again, reaching the end of their useful life. We're having to replace them out. And Crest Drive inlet replacement, this one's been a problem for quite some time. It's up on Crest Drive south of Timber Creek Elementary, and it's the one that goes out into the field there. Basically, if you drive down Sunset now, you see at the base of Sunset the spot where we doubled the width of the stormwater inlet there on the east side of Sunset. This project would be similar to that one. Within the transportation fund, again, the annual curb replacement program, continuing the fund, the annual street preservation program at $800,000, continuing to fund the right-of-way infrastructure repairs at $150,000, continuing to fund maintenance of thoroughfare routes at $200,000, New project, Fox Ridge Sidewalk from Drake to Creekmore Drive, $180,000. This originally began as a Safe Routes to Schools project. It is actually being funded by basically a grant from Mark, the entire $180,000. After we, of course, got this in Safe Routes to Schools, the school district announced that they would have 0 miles on their, particularly on school bus pickup. We still feel it's a valuable project, so people aren't crossing a lot of lanes of Fox Ridge Drive, and not everybody rides the bus. They still like to walk. The Operation Greenlight cameras, this is an upgrade to the Operation Greenlight cameras that we have. Is it in addition to as well, Mr. Krass? Got it. The traffic study on North Cass Parkway with all of the proposed development that's going in down there, the commercial, the industrial, we need to have a plan when these people come in. It's got to be an interconnected plan because only we have that bigger picture. Under normal circumstances, developer comes in, we make them provide a traffic study. There's too many moving parts down there. This developer is going to provide this traffic study just based on theirs, and it's going to conflict when a developer of the different usage comes in here. We want to take control of that so we control our own traffic pattern destiny, if you will. A little dramatic for that particular item, but what the heck. Turn lane at 58 Highway to Fox Ridge. The council will remember we actually proposed this to you all, indicating that it was in the CIP, as well as the intersection improvements at 58 Highway and Fox Ridge. That came before you for the road improvement agreement last week. Traffic study at 58 Highway and Dean Avenue. This is the traffic study that we had hoped would take place after we had proposed development at the North Galleria location that we had proposed to you all. But we had also made a promise to our sister city, Belton, that we would not let a period of 24 months go by without proposing to you all, even if there was no development there. We know we are beginning to get a pretty good idea of how that's going to look within there. Nothing final and no names that we can give you, but we at least know how it's going to look to contribute to the traffic study. We need to get this. The traffic study will be Kentucky Road from the beginning of the development to 58 Highway. Belray east on 58 Highway to Mott, and Dean Avenue south to Lucy Webb. So a very comprehensive traffic study for that particular area, and much needed. I have a feeling I know what some of the recommendations are going to be already going into that. Last item within transportation is undeveloped sidewalks on undeveloped lots within the city. This is not the GAP program. This is sidewalks where we identify particular areas of the city that still have sidewalk that just jump up and nobody realized and they need sidewalk on them. Any questions on the transportation portion?
Question?
I assume our street lights are considered part of our transportation program. Is that a correct assessment, or are they in a different?
The street lights are part of the transportation program.
Okay. And this came up in conversation with Mr. Krass a couple of weeks ago. It's too late for this budget, but we know, and Mr. Krass has said, staff's already identified that especially the eastern or older part of our city is very dark and doesn't have very many streetlights. I think probably going forward, that's something we're going to have to look at, and he said staff had already identified that, but I fully support us doing a study of where we have less than optimal streetlights, such as Heritage Drive and some of the streets over there in that older portion where we had different standards back then than what we do now, and then looking at some type of comprehensive way, even small amounts, to fund that over the years, much like we do our street preservation and our curb replacement.
Mr. Kras? $4 million? Few commas. Staff has identified, if we were using current standards, those areas where back in the day, you had the street light or a gas lamp. And it would be in excess of $4 million-ish to actually get everybody up to standard. Many of you have heard me tell the story that on my first day with the city, Todd Thompson called me into his office and he said, "Here's my one piece of advice for you. Never forget, not everybody wants a sidewalk in front of their house, and we need to get the streets lit better, but we're also going to have to be very conscious of the fact that it's a difficult process. While they want the light, they don't want too much light, they want just enough light, and they sure don't want it in their front yard." So that will be an interesting project once we undertake it.
Jim, when you do identify those areas and you do have people that are willing for those, where's that budget at? Where's that come from when we're installing new lights throughout the year? Is there a particular, is it a capital or is it included in Mike's budget?
We have enough to install maybe 2 lights a year within the operating component of the budget. The only way we're going to get to the hundreds of lights that reach the standard is utilizing GO bond money.
Absent that decision, is there a way for that to be included in capital projects in the future, much like curb replacement or light installation, where you could say target 50 or 75 lights a year to kind of move in that direction where you're lighting the community? Is that a viable plan, or is it something that you really want to go after a GO bond issue to do?
I worry that if we tried to, first of all, I don't know where the funding would come from, because even 50 to 100 lights, how much a light, Mike? Yeah, we're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars out of some fund, and if you look through the capital funds, that with what we do just for street press and curb replacement, we really drain that transportation fund down. Capital improvement sales tax, perhaps we use the savings, I believe, in capital improvement sales tax when we do this bond refunding are going to be slightly over $400,000. Is that correct, Ms. Williams? Per year? 240,000. Maybe we could, when we get that refunding done, we could dedicate a particular component of the capital improvement sales tax, but at $100,000 a year, 10 lights a year, you're going to be way out there. Yeah. I worry a little bit about rate, but again, I say that it will bear a work session discussion with the council as to whether you're going to, if we go with a program like that and it's just like a street preservation program, would the council have the tolerance to make it mandatory? In other words, we're going onto the street, whether you like it or not, and here's where the engineer says these lights need to be. And if the council had that tolerance, then we could approach it with a plan. Otherwise, then we're into the do y'all want it on your street? Don't you want it on your street? And then when the street turns over, what happens? Because now you have a whole new group of residents. Now they're saying we want the street lights. And so if we did something like that, we would have to have a pretty tight plan, sir.
Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question about streetlights. Approximately what percentage of our streetlights are LED lights, and what kind of impact will all these lights have on light pollution? I used to be able to see a lot of stars, and now I see a lot of light from the north of my house, from over here.
A lot of folks who talk about that. All the lights on 58 Highway, all the lights on Dean Avenue, all the lights on Fox Ridge, all the lights on Lucy Webb are LED. They were changed out with the grant program with Mark several years ago. As old lights give out, they are replaced with LED. Anything else? Last but not least is this little water item for $144,000. It's the continuing replacement. You'll remember Mr. Krass came to you all talking about the fact that as we did the hydrant inventory, there are several of them that either don't work or don't work well. So we want to keep that program going until we get them all up to snuff. That concludes the capital portion of the budget, sir. And that concludes my budget presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions the council might have.
Anybody? Any questions? I know there's been a lot of information that's been given to us over the past week, and it's great. I mean, it's very organized. It's always a wonderment how you put it all together with the team of little experts that you have, so we appreciate that very much. There's a lot to think about here. I didn't know if anybody had any particular questions right now or not. Mr. Jacobson.
I'm just going to ask, this can be kind of a curveball for you, which you're used to, I think. But first of all, having dealt with this years ago, as we were talking before this budget, where it was on a Saturday morning, it would go forever, as Mr. Mayor pointed out, where we would have silly conversations about things that we really need to get into. So I really like the layout of this budget. I especially like the fact that you get into the appendix and the glossary, and we start looking at things for the future, things that, and even the way you've delineated the importance of each of these things. So I guess actually this is just a very generic question, but if there was one thing that is really, that you had to cut out of this that's really important to you, that maybe some help is needed down the road, if there's one thing that you could point to, I'm sure you probably got 7 or 8 here that they probably all stand up and say, but for you, if there's one thing, is there something that didn't make it into the budget that you would really like to have had? One thing. This is coming from a former newsman, so.
I would pay our people more.
Okay, fair enough.
20, looking the folks in the eye during the presentation that I will be doing probably next week, because you all see it first, and then I always like to let them know where things are at. When you got to look folks who do what they do in the eye and tell them they're getting a 0.5% increase, but their insurance is going to go up by maybe 20%, that's a tough thing to do. We have good people. I'll leave it at that.
Well, if I could add on to that, first of all, I agree with you. I think that's a great answer, by the way. Yeah, when I heard the increase, you kind of, as you know, and hopefully some of the staff knows, and I will make it clear to anybody who ever asks me, the people that work for the city are probably the most important thing, yourself included, on down. And you all make it happen, so I would completely agree with that. The reason I was asking the question is obviously the budget now is what it is. When we would give stock reports, or when our company would give stock reports, one of the opening lines that they would say is, please remember, this is a snapshot in time, which a line I always love, because as Councilman Holman said, it's a living budget, things change. And that's the reason I was asking, is as we look down the road, because I agree, I'm a little concerned about the economy for the next year as it affects the city of Raymore and our revenue. So that's the reason behind my question, is if once we get through this, what might we be looking at down the road that we could probably plug back in that didn't get a chance to be plugged in now? That was the genesis of my question. So that's all I had. Thank you, sir.
Anything to add to that?
I wouldn't do this out of my fear. The first thing I would add back in, but I can't in good conscience call myself a conservative budgeter if I were to do this. But if the medical benefit came in low enough that I could get our folks, lower that amount in the budget, but increase that 0.5% to 1%, that would be the next thing I would propose to the city council. But I'm just so worried about next year.
More of a comment than a question. First of all, when I was in the Air Force, one of the things they taught us at NCO Prep School was a question, and it was, what is the most valuable resource of the United States Air Force? Of course, at that time, the F-16 Fighting Falcon was comparable to an F-15 or F-18 Hornet in the Navy, a lot of competition between the two, and the response was our people. Because without our people, those multi-million-dollar aircraft don't fly, whether it's pilot, whether it's mechanic, whether it's support field. Our staff is no different here. They make and break the city, and I agree totally. I concur with your assessment, sir. I also wanted to say I think you did do an excellent job. I'm sorry that it gave you such fits this year, but I thought you did. I thought this is a very thoughtful budget this year. I think it's very fiscally prudent and sound, and I believe your strategy of asking for great temperance and restraint in spending of unreserved fund balance, while we have enjoyed that over the last several years, I think this is the time in history to follow that advice, not only because of some of the unexpected things that came up in the past year, but also the fact that we're going to be looking at, as you stated tonight, a GEO bond no tax increase item, which is going to give us some more of the things that we need, and also that we are looking towards the possibility of annexation in some short order of a couple of years or so, in which case we're going to automatically have to add on to infrastructure, our people, things that we know are going to cost us a lot of money. This is a good year to save up and kind of take a look, and we've always got that opportunity in 6 months. Once we get past the winter weather, we see where our revenues are coming in, as Councilmember Jacobson said. If we want to add something back in at that point, I think we can certainly take a look again.
Mr. Burke?
Thank you. I was looking at this last Friday instead of taking a nap or going out to happy hour or something, and my children were asking me why I was looking at it, and I said, I always want to find out what new projects in it. My final word to them was, well, this is not as sexy of a budget as we've seen in recent years, but it does a lot to preserve the relationships that we have going on all over the place instead of trying to look for somebody else to be with.
Mr. Barber?
Thank you, and I concur with my colleagues. Mr. Fearborn, I appreciate your conservative nature. In fact, I put my list together and I wrote everything down that I want right there. So just to let you be at ease with that. I was curious on this 20% increase. Does that have a finite number? Do you know exactly what that number is?
We do not, sir.
I would be curious to know that number at some point, what that equal to. So,
Absolutely.
All right.
Anyone else? Anybody from the peanut gallery back there? No. All right, well, if there's nothing else, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.